interface code, particularly Chapter 5, that drives construction type.
Very good. And that's really a key tool for us in looking at incorporating policies into our master plan as well. So important planning tool.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Next question, actually from the same person. I believe this is to Carol as well. Where can I obtain the Wildfire Standards Retrofit Guide?
That's Brenda.
Oh, yeah,
Brenda,
that would definitely be me. You can get that from our website, which is www.disastersafety.org. And then just click on Get Prepared, and you'll see wildfire. Click on that, and then you'll see the regional guides. And they're available free of charge.
Thank you. Next person said, this is not a question, but wanted to point out that Montana also has a statewide Fire Safe Council program in place. Next question is, what's going to happen when the fire chiefs stand up and say our folks will no longer fight wildland fires? You build in the wildland, provide your own protection. With the life loss going up each year, is your home worth fireman's life? Come see this coming. Kurt, you want to address that one?
Yes, and I understand the concern with the comment. However, what we're doing at the national level and here at the Washoe County level is we're attempting to work with our communities and our fire safe councils to evolve into a fire-resistive community concept that will minimize the impact on your local fire services. We believe a well-prepared, well-organized, retrofitted community that does their defensible space will minimize the impact on the fire agency. It's not going to reduce our response, but it will help us get from that point where the chiefs throw up their hands, which none of us will, and say, we just can't do it anymore. We've absolutely got to have public participation and landowner recognition and responsibility, and that's how we're going to have better prepared communities.
This is Adrian. I wanted to emphasize something about Kurt's position. I don't know that it's a unique position, but I'm sure many of you have multiple fire districts in your jurisdictions. Kurt is the fire services coordinator that works with each of those districts and also helps us to get some uniformity, some focus on important issues like wildland-urban interface safety by working with each of those fire districts. So I certainly would encourage a lot of you to take a look at the possibility of establishing that type condition if you have multiple fire jurisdictions inside of your communities.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next question. I understand that there are going to be changes in the current ISO standards. What are those changes going to be? How are these changes going to affect the wildland fires and the urban interface?
That is unknown at this time. We're meeting nationally, and I have not seen any of the most recent developments on that. There's been a real need, in my opinion, to update the way ISO looks at the fire service for quite some time, and it's refreshing that we're finally having the dialogue.
Okay. All right, the next question is a rather lengthy one. See if I can pare it down here. So the issues of incentives for homeowners that have mitigated the wildland fire risks keep coming up. And the insurance industry always rejects the idea of claiming that losses from wildland fire are not large enough to make it economically viable in the market. The 17 million homes, and the Willie figure that we, let's see, I can't seem to get the rest of the question here. If the 17 million homes and the Willie figure that we saw the last presentation would seem to say there's a significant market that incentives would be potentially directed toward. If the insurance industry were to offer such incentives that possibly let's see, would, 1 minute. To offer such incentives, perhaps that would make the mitigation job easier and more widespread.
I can speak to that. And that's one reason I think we do point out that insurance does work backwards.
Right.
The good part is insurance companies just don't willy-nilly raise your rates. They're actually looking at their claim experience. Obviously, they're looking at the market risk and the danger in the WUI, and it's a huge concern. But frankly, they can't just offer a discount or an incentive if it isn't based on actual claims experience as well. And so that doesn't come into play, and certainly that is one of our messages. I think that's why we put such emphasis on mitigation and the requirements to do the mitigation, to stay with a preferred provider, to keep your insurance. So certainly for an insurance company to give an incentive when they haven't had the losses yet. So unfortunately, as we begin having these losses, the question may be, are there discounts or incentives available that we could give out? At this point, it doesn't statistically make sense, and at the same time, frankly, insurance companies aren't moving that way. They're moving much more in the direction of requiring mitigation and availability rather than giving discounts to somebody that lives in a higher risk wildfire area anyway. Right. Frankly, as we talked about mega catastrophes, insurance companies are looking at all of their risks. Some companies don't offer earthquake endorsements anymore. So certainly we're not telling people where to live. They can still live in that high-risk wildfire area. That community just has to see it as a shared risk. And I think that's a huge incentive, pocketbook incentive, to keep your insurance.
And this is another sticky one. What if your neighbors do not responsibly keep the property clear, and that causes the fire that burns your house down?
Hey, James, this is Brenda. I just want to add one quick thing to that previous question.
Sure.
We talk a lot about insurance discounts and incentives and so on, and there's another player in the financial services community that could help here, and that's the mortgage industry. That could, come into play when you're talking about new construction or even making mortgages for existing homes as well. I mean, there are things that can be done through the mortgage lender that we should be thinking about too. It's not just insurers.
Okay.
And James, I'll go ahead and handle that question. It's more of a regulatory question. Obviously, we place a lot of emphasis on self-compliance and taking responsibility. However, we're not blind to the fact that we do have some homeowners in the communities that choose to ignore maintaining their property for whatever reason. And that goes back to the insurance. We like to work with our planners in our community to develop communities that will maintain their defensible space so they can maintain their insurance. However, with all that said, the answer to the question depends on the regulations, the ordinance, and the codes that are adopted within the specific jurisdiction.
Right.
Many jurisdictions actually have a forced abatement section within their ordinances. So if somebody has been noticed, they don't maintain their property, then the agency can come in and forced abate, or and charge them or assess their taxes. In addition, there are some codes that are written in such a way that once you've been noticed, if you don't eliminate the hazard, then you are liable for the damage created and the cost of the fire suppression. And then last, and this would be more to a legal question, we don't have a legal person on our panel, some of us believe that there's the potential for civil litigation should a homeowner lose their home because of improper maintenance of neighbors. And that's not a legal opinion because I'm not an attorney.
Okay.
I think that's where insurance comes into play too, because insurance companies cannot just choose not to write in a community. They can't say Breckenridge is too high of a risk for us, but they can on a case-by-case basis require mitigation to keep insurance. So I think that encourages individual homeowners to do the right thing.
Okay. Next question. Rate reductions are often touted as the keys to engaging homeowners. If you give them a 10% reduction in rates, they will do the mitigation work needed around their homes. I've been told that this would be 10% of the fire portion of their homeowner's policy, which could result in 10% of the $500 portion of the policy that goes toward fire insurance. True. Any thoughts on that?
Sounds like a question for our insurance folks.
I think it's the same question. Insurance companies right now from a policy direction, as Brenda said, individual companies are going to make their own business decision, but the direction they're not taking is offering discounts or incentives.
Okay.
It's absolutely requiring the mitigation to keep insurance.
Okay. And I know we haven't covered this issue, but someone asked about how do control burns enter into this equation.
Controlled burns, are sometimes referred to prescription, are a tool that's typically used to maintain a certain reduction level of the hazard, and we use them primarily as a ground flyer tool to maintain a reduced hazard. Sometimes what we're finding now is folks are confusing controlled burns with what's called pile burning. Unfortunately, in the heavier wooded interface areas, in order to get good hazardous fuels reduction in a cost-effective manner, it is necessary to do some burning. However, most of us create very, very elaborate and conditioned burning plans. We have a go or no-go checklist that we go through, and we're very, very careful when we put what we call fire on the ground. Encourage any of us on the call in the counties to make sure you coordinate with your fire agencies and find out how they're using controlled fire.
Okay. Other question, how are you referring to lawn sprinkler systems or internal home sprinkler systems, or referring to sprinklers in the WUI?
We were actually talking about about internal sprinklering to the homes, and Kurt may want to talk a little bit about that. We've had some interesting cases before our Board of Adjustment here in the last year where people are looking for relief from that, and they don't have adequate water supply to provide firefighting pressures. I know that at the APA National Conference last spring, one of our presenters also talked about external sprinklering that they've instituted in their particular county. Kurt?
Yeah, there's a couple of systems that we look at. One is the internal, and I've had comments, well, wait a minute, the internal's not going to do anything for my neighbor's house burning down and threatening my house, and that's correct. However, we also look at the ability to suppress the fire in the residence to keep from having structure-to-structure ignition. So that's what the internal sprinkler systems do, and the internal sprinkler systems are now so sophisticated that the fire flow demands for them are much less than if I was going to require fire hydrants throughout a neighborhood that can't support them. And then we are seeing within some of the plans that are being presented now for wildland urban interface protection, perimeter sprinkler systems, particularly one of the speakers mentioned the hazard of embers. In reality, that's how we burn down most of our homes in the wildland urban interfaces, from ember introduction. But so we're seeing more and more sprinkler systems for the perimeter of the homes and up under the eaves. And then there are some systems out there that do come on around the landscaped area, with the thought being that if I can keep that area moist and keep fire from intruding into my landscape, it won't communicate to the home, and that's a pretty good approach. The problem is the water supply. One of the challenges we have coming into the wildland urban interface fire are the homes that are running their sprinklers constantly and using a lot of water, drawing the system down. So it's a check and balance, or it's a give and take. And if you have one of these areas where you don't have a good water supply, again, and you've heard this from me 2 or 3 times now, get with the local fire agency and help them help you condition these projects.
All right, thank you. This question's for Carol. How do insurance